Okay, everybody, this is Kennedy John. I'm going to do some yoga here. You guys enjoy this afternoon podcast of peace, solitude, flexibility, and strength, and breathing, and music. Tao.
Bigoted adherents.
Candidate Congressman John Kitover running against Darren LaHood in the 16th District, reading poetry to unseat and defeat the superpower, super spender, super taxer Darren LaHood from Rockford to Peoria. This is the Rose Part 3. Yet sensitive to pain so hideous that sometimes he appears all pain, all fear, all hate. So slavish yet so fierce a king, a tyrant to himself, insidious, cunning as some sordid sorceress, capable of action or control, yet a black gulf to drown so strong a soul. He lay close curled within my rose's heart. There is no blame, yet what avails all art? See, reeled back beneath the blow of her breath, she comes smiling to me. That disgust changes her drunken lust into a shriek of hate, half conscious still beneath the obsession of a will of all she was before her death. Her death, she so hell boils over and she rages. It seems to countless ages with all the vile abuse that had degraded Glasgow's grievous stews, with all the knowledge of despair, striking me cunningly, striking everywhere, mutilating the corpse of my dead love with such savagery, intensity above all understanding that it bleeds again as a corpse should bleed at the murderer's touch. Then, not content, she must needs much. All my past purifying pain, turning all life to a thing foul of vain.
There's nothing you will
Or
try
give
to
imaginable
hold on
to
to
man who asks me for my tip.
if you aren't afraid of dying. There is nothing you can't achieve. Trying to control the future is like trying to take the master carpenter's place. When you handle the master carpenter's tools, chances are that you'll cut your hand.
Okay, cool.
75. When taxes are too high, people go hungry. When the government is too intrusive, people lose their spirit. Act for the people's benefit. Trust them. Leave them alone. 76. Men are born soft and supple. Dead, they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliant. Dead, they are brittle and dry. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life. The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail. 77. As it acts in the world, the Tao is like the bending of a bow. The top is bent downward. The bottom is bent up. It adjusts excess and deficiency so that there is perfect balance. takes from what is too much and gives to what isn't enough. Those who try to control, who use force to protect their power, go against the direction of the Tao. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have far too much. The master can keep giving because there is no end to her wealth. She acts without expectation, succeeds without taking credit, and doesn't think that she is better than anyone else. 78. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible,
This is 3 minutes
nothing
of
can
yoga.
surpass it.
Oh, this is 3 minutes of
The
yoga with
soft
Canada and John. This
overcomes
is a
the
hip
hard.
rotation. Oh.
The gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart, because he has given up helping. He is people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical. 79. Failure is an opportunity. If you blame someone else, there is no end to the blame. Therefore, the master fulfills her own obligations and corrects her own mistakes. She does what she needs to do and demands nothing of others. 80. If a country is governed wisely, its inhabitants will be content. They enjoy the labor of their hands and don't waste time inventing labor-saving machines. Since they dearly love their homes, they aren't interested in travel. There may be a few wagons and boats, but these don't go anywhere. There may be an arsenal of weapons, but nobody ever uses them. People enjoy their food, take pleasure in being with their families, spend weekends working in their gardens, delight in the doings of the neighborhood. And even though the next country is so close that people can hear its roosters crowing and its dogs barking, they are content to die of old age without ever having gone to see it. 81. True words aren't eloquent. Eloquent words aren't true. Wise men don't need to prove their point. Men who need to prove their point aren't wise. The master has no possessions. The more he does for others, the happier he is. The more he gives to others, the wealthier he is. The Tao nourishes by not forcing, by not dominating. The master leads. Tao Te Ching can be translated as book of the imminence of the way, or the book of the way and of how it manifests itself in the world, or simply the book of the way. Since it is already well known by its Chinese title, I have let that stand. About Lao Tzu, its author, there's practically nothing to be said. He may have been an older contemporary of Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, and may have held the position of archive keeper in one of the petty kingdoms of the time. But all the information that has come down to us is highly suspect. Even the meaning of his name is uncertain. The most likely interpretations, the old master, or more picturesquely, the old boy. Like an Iroquois woodsman, he left no traces. All he left us is his book, the classic manual on the art of living, written in a style of gem-like lucidity, radiant with humor and grace, and large-heartedness and deep wisdom, one of the wonders of the world. People usually think of Lao Tzu as a hermit, a dropout from society, dwelling serenely in some mountain hut, unvisited except perhaps by the occasional traveler arriving from a 60s joke to ask, what is the meaning of life? But it's clear from his teachings that he deeply cared about society, if society means the welfare of one's fellow human beings. His book is, among other things, a treatise on the art of government, whether of a country or of a child. The misperception may arise from his insistence on wei wu wei, literally, doing, not doing, which has been seen as passivity. Nothing could be further from the truth. A good athlete can enter a state of body awareness in which the right stroke or the right movement happens by itself, effortlessly, without any interference of the conscious will. This is a paradigm for non-action, the purest and most effective form of action. The game plays the game. The poem writes the poem. We can't tell the dancer from the dance. Less and less do you need to force things, until finally you arrive at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. Nothing is done because the doer has wholeheartedly vanished into the deed. The fuel has been completely transformed into flame. This nothing is in fact everything. It happens when we trust the intelligence of the universe in the same way that an athlete or a dancer trusts the superior intelligence of the body. Hence Lao Tzu's emphasis on softness. Softness means the opposite of rigidity and is synonymous with suppleness, adaptability, endurance. Anyone who has seen a Tai Chi or Aikido master doing not doing will know how powerful this softness is. Lao Tzu's central figure is a man or woman whose life is in perfect harmony with the way things are. This is not an idea, it is a reality. I have seen it. The master has mastered nature, not in the sense of conquering it, but of becoming it. In surrendering to the Tao, in giving up all concepts, judgments, and desires, her mind has grown naturally compassionate. She finds, deep in her own experience, the central truths of the art of living, which are paradoxical only on the surface, that the more truly solitary we are, the more compassionate we can be. The more we let go of what we love, the more present our love becomes. The clearer our insight into what is beyond good and evil, the more we can embody the good. Until finally she is able to say, in all humility, I am the Tao, the truth, the life. The teaching of the Tao Te Ching is moral in the deepest sense, unencumbered by any concept of sin. The master doesn't see evil as a force to resist, but simply as an opaqueness, a state of self-absorption which is in disharmony with the universal process, so that, as with a dirty window, the light can't shine through. This freedom from moral categories allows him his great compassion for the wicked and the selfish. Thus the master is available to all people and doesn't reject anyone. He is ready to use all situations and doesn't waste anything. This is called embodying the light. What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? If you don't understand this, you will get lost, however intelligent you are. It is the great secret. The listener will notice that in the many passages where Lao Tzu describes the master, I've used the pronoun she at least as often as he. The Chinese language doesn't make this kind of distinction. In English, we have to choose. But since we are all potentially the master, since the master is essentially us, I felt it would be untrue to present a male archetype, as other versions have ironically done. Ironically, because of all the great world religions, the teaching of Lao Tzu is by far the most female. Of course, you should feel free throughout the recording to substitute he for she, or vice versa. As to method, I worked from Paul Karas's literal version, which provides English equivalents, often very quaint ones, alongside each of the Chinese ideograms. I also consulted dozens of translations into English, German, and French. But the most essential preparation for my work was a 14 years long course of Zen training, which brought me face to face with Lao Tzu and his true disciples and heirs, the early Chinese Zen masters. With great poetry, the freest translation is sometimes the most faithful. We must try its effect as an English poem, Dr. Johnson said. That is the way to judge of the merit of a translation. I have often been fairly literal, or as literal as one can be with such a subtle, kaleidoscopic book as the Tao Te Ching. But I have also paraphrased, expanded, contracted, interpreted, worked with the text, played with it, until it became embodied in a language that felt genuine to me. If I haven't always translated Lao Tzu's words, my intention has always been to translate his mind. Describing the indescribable, teaching the unteachable, pointing the way to the way. What does Lao Tzu think he is doing here? It can't be done. No way. Hence, Po Chu-yi, poet and stand-up comedian, wrote, "He who talks doesn't know, he who knows doesn't talk." That is what Lao Tzu told us in a book of 5,000 words. If he was the one who knew, how could he have been such a blabbermouth? That's the problem with spiritual teachers. They have to be blabbermouths. But their words are, in the traditional Buddhist metaphor, fingers pointing at the moon. If you watch the finger, you can't see the moon. How meticulous the great masters had to be. A monk asked Matsu, "Why do you teach mind is Buddha?" Matsu said, "To stop a baby from crying." The monk said, "When the crying has stopped, what then?" Matsu said, "Then I teach, not mind, not Buddha." The monk said, "How about someone who isn't attached to either?" Matsu said, "I would tell him, not beings." The monk said, "And what if you met a man unattached to all things? What would you tell him?" Matsu said, "I would just let him experience the great Tao." In fact, the truth is right before our eyes, right under our noses. So simple that every child understands it. And yet, as Bankei said, the farther you enter into it, the deeper it is. Where is the way to the way? What a question. Still, for complicated minds, drastic measures are needed. Lao Tzu's book was written as a response out of grandmotherly kindness. According to the oldest biography, Lao Tzu lived for a long time in the country of Chu, but seeing its decline, he departed. When he reached the frontier, the guard said, Since you are going away, sir, could you write a book to teach me the art of living? Thereupon, Lao Tzu wrote his book about the Tao and departed. This is legend, but it is an accurate description of the way in which true teaching happens. He who knows doesn't talk, but words are no hindrance for him. He uses them as he would use gardening tools. When someone asks, he answers. Tao Te Ching. 1. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness. The gateway to all understanding. 2. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. Therefore the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess, acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. 3. If you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. The master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think that they know. Practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. 4. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. 5. The Tao doesn't take sides. It gives birth to both good and evil. The master doesn't take sides. She welcomes both saints and sinners. The Tao is like a bellows. It is empty, yet infinitely capable. The more you use it, the more it produces. The more you talk of it, the less you understand. Hold on to the center. 6. The Tao is called the Great Mother. Empty, yet inexhaustible, it gives birth to infinite worlds. It is always present within you. You can use it any way you want. 7. The Tao is infinite, eternal. Why is it eternal? It was never born, thus it can never die. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself, thus it is present for all beings. The Master stays behind, that is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. 8. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. Thus, it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you. 9. Fill your bowl to the brim, and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife, and it will blunt. Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. 10. Can you coax your mind from its wandering and keep to the original oneness? Can you let your body become supple as a newborn child's? Can you cleanse your inner vision until you see nothing but the light? Can you love people and lead them without imposing your will? Can you deal with the most vital matters by letting events take their course? Can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things? Giving birth and nourishing, having without possessing, acting with no expectations, leading and not trying to control. This is the supreme virtue. 11. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. 12. Colors blind the eye. Sounds deafen the ear. Flavors numb the taste. Thoughts weaken the mind. Desires wither the heart. The master observes the world, but trusts his inner vision. He allows things to come and go. His heart is open as the sky. 13. Success is as dangerous as failure. Hope is as hollow as fear. What does it mean that success is as dangerous as failure? Whether you go up the ladder or down it, your position is shaky. When you stand with your 2 feet on the ground, you will always keep your balance. What does it mean that hope is as hollow as fear? Hope and fear are both phantoms that arise from thinking of the self. When we don't see the self as self, what do we have to fear? See the world as yourself. Have faith in the way things are. Love the world as yourself. Then you can care for all things. 14. Look, and it can't be seen. Listen, and it can't be heard. Reach, and it can't be grasped. Above, it isn't bright. Below, it isn't dark. Seamless, unnameable, it returns to the realm of nothing. Form that includes all forms. Image without an image. Subtle, beyond all conception. Approach it, and there is no beginning. Follow it, and there is no end. You can't know it, but you can be it, at ease in your own life. Just realize where you come from. This is the essence of wisdom. 15. The ancient masters were profound and subtle. Their wisdom was unfathomable. There is no way to describe it. All we can describe is their appearance. They were careful as someone crossing an iced-over stream, alert as a warrior in enemy territory, courteous as a guest, fluid as melting ice, shapeable as a block of wood, receptive as a valley, clear as a glass of water. Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The master doesn't seek fulfillment. Not seeking, not expecting. She is present and can welcome all things. 16. Empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings, but contemplate their return. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Immersed in the wonder of the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings you. And when death comes, you are ready. 17. When the master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. Next best is a leader who is loved. Next, one who is feared. The worst is one who is despised. If you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. The master doesn't talk, he acts. When his work is done, the people say, "Amazing, we did it, all by ourselves." 18. When the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. When the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and knowledge step forth. When there is no peace in the family, filial piety begins. When the country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. 19. Throw away holiness and wisdom, and people will be 100 times happier. Throw away morality and justice, and people will do the right thing. Throw away industry and profit, and there won't be any thieves. If these three aren't enough, just stay at the center of the circle and let all things take their course. 20. Stop thinking and end your problems. What difference between yes and no? What difference between success and failure? Must you value what others value, avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous. Other people are excited, as though they were at a parade. I alone don't care. I alone am expressionless, like an infant before it can smile. Other people have what they need. I alone possess nothing. I alone drift about like someone without a home. I am like an idiot. My mind is so empty. Other people are bright. I alone am dark. Other people are sharp. I alone am dull. Other people have a purpose. I alone don't know. I drift like a wave on the ocean. I blow as aimless as the wind. I am different from ordinary people. I drink from the great mother's breasts.
It may be factual. I don't know the complete history. I know a little bit of the history of the Russian people, that they're a civilization, and that he feels, I think from the 1990s up until this present border with him from the NATO alliance, there's a consternation to his mindset about being disrespected. Like, we had the Monroe Doctrine here that we projected for a long time, and maybe we still are with these on these drugs off the coast of Venezuela. But that's a component in this man's mind. And I think when you start dealing with someone like that, if you want to follow the path that Anson had laid out, fine. But I think if you lay out that path, you should be cognizant about how your potential enemy views the conflict. And when you start talking about honor and you start talking about civilization, integrity of the civilization, you're getting into a lot deeper emotional and strategic resolve on how far you might go. That, if you're 10,000 miles away from your homeland, you're battling over some kind of regional control of something, you may not have the same mindset you would have if you view it as something that's endemic to your civilization and how you're being viewed and how the world views you. And so there's that component. And I think that component is dangerous in the mindset that if Vladimir Putin holds that, and Trump, by his nature, the way that he negotiates, it could be two personalities and two mindsets that could escalate a ladder fairly quickly based on the personalities and how they think. So there's that component too. But I agree with Anson. If you're going to do this, given the limited range and the strategic value of the asset you're deploying, if you hit an apartment, it's not going to do as much as hitting a refinery or hitting a supply depot strategically to the outcome of the order. So I think if Zelensky gets these, I think he should selectively use them onto the military assets that could impede the Russian movement into his country. I think that'd be a lot more effective use. I'm kind of on the fence with this because I don't trust his mindset on how he views what is occurring. I think he's almost in an honor mode, a civilization honor mode. And if you want to challenge that, that's fine, but you probably want to be very cognizant of how quickly that mindset could ramp up into the escalatory action. So that's my take on it, Gary. I mean, I may be completely wrong, but I think those personality components with these two men is very critical on how you.
Steve, something about fighting thousands of miles away from home and not having skin in the fight, perhaps. Are you suggesting that if we deploy or or give, I guess deploy is the right word, Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, that there would be Americans involved in the battle other than being advisors and teaching people how to use the Tomahawks?
What I was driving at, Gary, no, completely different than that. What I was driving at, if you are a nation and you're battling enemy force, say us in Afghanistan, and something that we was in there trying to accomplish certain objectives, but when push comes to shove, we just pulled out. On the other hand, I think we'd view action, say, on our southern border, if we was engaged with a lot more attention, a lot more ferocity, and a lot more trying to protect the homeland at all times. And what I'm saying is, I think that could play in to how Putin thinks about, combined with this nationalistic civilization view that he has of Russia. So that's what I was driving at, not what you articulate. And that mindset, I believe, given those circumstances, has the potential. It may not, but I think it adds to the potential of escalation in this conflict. That's all I was trying to get at.
Got it. Thank you, Steve. And now we'll go to Dominic.
There I am. Hey, Gary. I'm kind of leaning towards Anson on this. I think the fear-mongering on issues of escalation are getting a little long in the tooth. I remember the very same arguments being made 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea under President Obama, and the leading from behind rationale was we don't want to put any American lives or assets at risk. Okay, so 2014 went, we had the World Cup in Russia. I think it was in 2000, a couple of years after that. And then again in 2020 with the full-on invasion into Ukraine, the chirping was, under no circumstances can we escalate. Under no circumstances can we escalate. It simply is not worth the bother. And we said, okay. Then, we backtracked on that and started. I remember a huge argument over the F-16s. No, was it F-16s or was it the MiG-23? It was one of those jet airplanes in which the huge argument had to do with how can we get control of the skies, or how could Ukraine get control of its skies if it only had the F-16s, and we fucked around with them for so long. It was unbelievable on that issue. And of course it folded into the ether, and Ukraine never got control of its skies. So the zeitgeist is, we're chicken. It's just the United States will not put anything at risk. It's just not politically correct. We don't have a belief system. We don't have courage. We just simply do not have the balls to do anything about it. And I have to come, I've had to surrender to this zeitgeist that exists in America, that nothing is worth dying for. Nothing. Except maybe killing the president or Charlie Kirk. I don't know. Maybe. And so, with that in mind, where we are always subject to the chicken who's going to chirp about what the risks are, and that's going to cause us to do nothing. It's a problem for me. And I don't know what to do about it. Having a chicken, a yellow streak, it's so difficult for me to swallow. I take what Steve says into consideration, but I got to tell you, I got a problem with being a coward. And I don't know what to do about it. Someone might say, well, you got to be rational. There are legitimate risks that a responsible government leader has to consider. Okay, I surrender. We'll do nothing, and we'll just go. And I think it certainly it inures to the benefit of China for this war to continue for as long as possible. So, hearing what Tiger had to say was no surprise at all. And so I don't know. It's difficult for me to be an American and have so much cowardliness. It's hard for me to deal with. I don't know what to do with it, Gary. Anyway, that's it.
So, given that the comments that you made about the historical background of U.S. Fear of getting too involved, and probably because of the Vietnam War, that's probably where it all started. That turned out to be quite the disaster. And we've had other disasters since then when we've gotten involved in things. As Anson points out, the last time we actually won a war was World War II, I believe. But we're talking about a Donald Trump administration. Do you think that all those factors that you just delineated really necessarily apply to Donald Trump and his way of thinking?
I do. It doesn't make me happy to say that, Gary, but I do believe that the national zeitgeist is chicken shit, and he cannot do anything about that. It's simply been baked into the personality of America to be bullied. And because we will not put anything at risk, because the chirpers will chirp if you put anything at risk. No one should die. No one should die for anything. And I don't get that. We should all be willing to die for something. Why aren't we willing to die for freedom?
Dominic, don't you think though that maybe that was more true, or I think maybe there was more willingness to sacrifice in the World War II generation, but post-Vietnam, post-Iraq, post-Afghanistan, maybe that's changed. Because I don't think that's always been, I don't necessarily think it's baked into the American character, but I think that the last, especially after the last, post-Vietnam, but especially the last two debacles, I think people are war weary, and that is something Trump's got his finger on the pulse of. It's one of the reasons I think he got elected in 2016 over Hillary. Hillary was a hawk, and Trump was a guy that you knew that guy was not. He was not.
It may not, but I think it adds to the potential of escalation in this conflict.
I'll take your point. it's a post-Vietnam baby boom and post-baby boom zeitgeist, and it's possible that it, from a sort of a psychological analysis, Scott, that there is an explanation for the chicken livered American outlook now, and that we're going to have to live with that. But you know, I'm just saying I'm not happy with it, Scott. That's all.
Well, you know, you talk about people squawking, and of course people are going to squawk, but we have a president that seems to be relatively autocratic, and he decides, and the norms of checking with Congress, for example, before taking major actions, he has no time to deal with Congress. He's going to move full speed ahead. Many people are very off-put by that, as we know. It's discussed often on this stage. There are other people who say it's about damn time. That's also occasionally articulated on this stage. But the reason I bring it up is whatever is built into the personality of the country post Vietnam War. And I'm not going to argue your point. I don't think that Donald Trump necessarily cares about any of that. If Donald Trump decides that we're going to accelerate our support for Ukraine, and that does not necessarily mean boots on the ground. You know, people have attacked me for saying this, but I thought it was brilliant of the president to come up with this deal where we sell the armaments to Europe, they purchase it, so the money comes into our economy, and then they provide the weaponry to Ukraine. I think that's brilliant. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go into an Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam protracted battle with coffins coming back to the United States, flag draped and all of that. I think that he has a bit of a license to do whatever he damn well pleases. Whether it's been given to him or whether he's taken it, it doesn't really matter. We know how he operates. So it would seem to me, again, not arguing your point, that this president doesn't give a damn about your point, basically.
I'll only take the exception to the tense of your argument. I'm pointing out, as it relates to President Trump, past behavior, as it relates specifically to Ukraine, and your speculative notions about what he might do. Okay, he certainly has established his capacity to do something different.
He planted his flag, right? He planted his flag.
Right. But he has not done it. So my point is, just relying on facts and not speculation, that so far, my point stands. And your point about what can happen in the future, okay, it's speculative, but I'll accept it.
Well, your point is speculative. Your point is speculative as well. Everything that we're saying here today is speculative, Dominic, because we have no idea, right?
Excuse me, Gary. I meant to laugh. I meant to chuckle. Gary, and I got caught in a cough. Sorry.
Okay, no problem, buddy. Okay, thank you, Dominic, and we'll now go to...
Can I ask Dominic, I know I'm breaking protocol, but could I ask him one question before he leaves? Oh, never mind.
Yeah, okay. Before we get to the next caller, we're at the 6 o'clock hour, so we will not be adding folks to the stage, but we will go into extra time so everybody on stage has an opportunity to speak. I just want to take a little break here and ask Scott to do some self-promotion because Scott just completed. This guy is the podcast maven. I don't think anybody turns out as many podcasts as Scott does. He's like a machine. But you just posted one that's extremely interesting, and I want to give you an opportunity to tell folks about it and how they
Yeah,
can
thanks,
find
Gary.
it.
Great.
And also recommend that you post the link to the chat.
Yeah, I'll post the link to the chat, and it's a really great episode. I had Jeffrey Rosen, the head of the Constitution Center in Philadelphia, the president and CEO of the Constitution Center, which is the only organization with a charter to promote and educate about the Constitution. He's an amazing guy, just a remarkable guy. And he's just written a book called The Pursuit of Liberty, and it's all about the conflict between Hamilton and Jefferson and how that conflict has shaped the American conception of liberty throughout American history. So he starts doing historical work on Hamilton and Jefferson, but then goes through from the post-Hamiltonian, Jeffersonian presidents and politicians all the way to President Trump. And it's just an amazing book, and he's an amazing guy. We had quite a remarkable conversation. He actually invited me to the book party next week, so I'm going to go. And what a lovely guy. For those of you who are fans of American politics and American history. And by the way, one thing I found out that I didn't know is there's a distinct possibility that Alexander Hamilton was Jewish. And I did not know that. So lots of great information in this podcast. Great conversation with Jeffrey Rosen. And thanks, Gary, for letting me shamelessly do a little self-promote.
Hey, Scott, congratulations. I guess that explains why Hamilton never could get elected.
Well, you know what? He was very sheepish about Christianity, and he did communion at his deathbed, but his mother, we think his mother there's a possibility of Judaism with the mother, and he was in a Jewish school, it appears, when he was in the Caribbean, and so very interesting connections.
I'll point out that Sammy Davis Jr. also played both sides of the ecumenical aisle at his death as well. he wanted to get all bases covered, so maybe Hamilton did as well.
Well, I play any side of an ecumenical aisle I can if a woman is attractive, Gary. You know me.
Yes, sir. David.
Yes, great room again, Gary. Great points all the way around. I think the United States is at possibly facing, an existential crisis with regard to its leadership in the world with regard to Ukraine and our inability to fully back Ukraine in a way that doesn't draw us into a more protracted war, which I believe that some of the comments in the room today speak to the United States' appetite to survive another massive conflict where blood and treasure are involved. And I think those watching closely in China, Xi Jinping and his military apparatus are probably, using this example of what we're going to do as obviously the calculus in their attack on Taiwan. I flew through Taiwan not too long ago, and I was in the downtown area and walking around and watching the youth enjoy their nights out and the dinners and everything. I asked myself, is this community of Chinese nationals under Taiwanese freedom able to withstand the mighty Xi Jinping armies? And I looked around, I was talking to my buddy, and I said, man, I don't know, this place does not look like it's in any way ready or capable or citizens ready to fight. They're enjoying too much of the West and what we provide. But I don't know, Gary. These are all speculations in the room. But we got to do something. Anson's right. We got to do something. And I think Zelensky He's already targeting the capitals. He's already targeting, I believe, St. Petersburg with drones. They're not as successful. And he is on the record as saying that with the help of the West and Tomahawks, that all bets are off the table. If they attack us, we're going to attack them. They better know where their bomb shelters are. I think this ultimately could really rattle the Russian population. And I don't think Putin wants any more destabilization with regard to the optics of how he's controlling the war or not. So there's that. I think that with these long-range capabilities come the ability for them to take out the very missiles that are raining down on their cities and their hospitals and their communities. So, while Putin may be upset, I don't know how he can leverage any more than he already has. He's already threatened our NATO allies and the borders of those countries that butt up against his. But he makes no bones about it, Gary, that this is all a payback for what he saw as the disrespect of the former Soviet Union post-1991 and the picking off of the various satellite countries that were part of the Warsaw Pact. And so in his mind, this is all payback. So we either stand up and say enough is enough, and however you want to view the optics of us helping Ukraine further this, that's not our problem, even though it is our problem. So I also read that the United States is prepared through a defense company to provide a certain form of military delivery capability of the Tomahawk, that I believe that the Tomahawk can only be deployed through a naval asset or an air asset, which I don't think Ukraine controls. But this new device, I believe it's more mobile on land, and would give and I heard it was showcased at a military conference. And so I think we are getting ready to sell or to at least provide this on some level. And hopefully it brings Putin to the bargaining table. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever he thought we were going to do on Ukraine's behalf was the stuff of, I mean, he was laughable when Putin met with Trump at the summit in Alaska. So I think it's time that we really either show our power or we don't. And I think ultimately this is an
yoga and
indirect
politics in
NATO
Canada,
play as
John.
well. And I believe Europe is also standing by, ready to respond. So let's see it happen. Let's see if either Putin comes to the table with some sort of concession that's going to work, or Ukraine gets the missiles, and I'll end there.
To your point about Europe and NATO, the article from which I quoted at the very beginning during my opening salvo in the Express, in the headline and deeper into the article they get into this, talks about how Europe is preparing for World War III. I'm not saying this to be alarmist. I'm just saying that when we've been analyzing this, we've kind of done it a little bit in a vacuum, talking about the United States and Tomahawk missiles, which of course is the topic of the room. But perhaps, as David just suggested, it's a completely different scenario, not necessarily a winning strategy, but a different scenario if we're talking about multiple fronts. Not just weaponry provided by the United States and technology provided by the United States and advisors teaching them how to use the weapons, but also whatever Europe has up its sleeve. So I'm certain as well that this is not happening in a vacuum, and the Kremlin is taking note of that as well, and they're factoring all that in to determine what their next move is. I don't know if he's prepared to fight a war on multiple fronts. And the threat that might occur, the Tomahawk missiles may have a greater impact as one component of something that potentially could be much more serious. It may not just be Tomahawk weapons used to change the balance of the conflict, it may be multiple military strategies that affect the outcome of the conflict. So that's really an important thing for us to watch, which I don't think we watch very often or very well in the United States. Thank you, David, for bringing that up. And we'll now go to William.
Hey, good afternoon. I think we should, in the national interest of the United States, and to salvage what leadership we have in the world as one of the leaders of the free world, we should give Ukraine what they need to win this war and push the Russians back to their own borders. And what we've shown since 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, there's a lot of diplomacy and negotiation with Russia, but what we've shown is a lot of weakness. And this war will drag on for a long time with more death and bad outcomes if we don't give Ukraine what it needs to win. And it is not just us. When there was equivocation about our leadership in NATO, the Europeans went ahead and formed their own additional alliances additional to NATO, and they are prepared to fight the Russians. They're not 100% prepared, and they still need the United States. That is an important component of any plan to defend Europe and help Ukraine win against the Russian invasion. But the other powers are moving ahead with us and without us. And if you just look at the stock market, look at the European defense stocks, they have jumped in 2025 substantially, like a couple of fold. Rheinmetall and BAE and BAE is partially American, but the various Saab stocks, they are on the move, putting substantial real money and capitalization into building a war machine to fight Russia, and it's no joke. And Anson put it beautifully that Ukraine needs to be furnished tomahawks, yes, and I would go further. They need to be furnished the assistance that we can to help them win and just push the Russians back to their own country, because it's in the national security interests of the United States. And one of the things that Trump is accomplishing and remember, Trump is flip-flopped. He's switched sides on this. At one point, it looked like Witkoff was going over to the Kremlin and spouting Russian talking points to the damage of Ukraine. And when that didn't work out, then Trump went the other way. So, one of the things he's accomplishing to the benefit of the United States is keeping the American military-industrial complex more in the game, so that our military manufacturers can flourish doing what needs to be done. And our military stocks are doing fine as well, which is one fairly objective measure of what's going on. Not the only one, but I don't have insider information. I can just, read what is publicly facing. So yeah, I think we need to have Ukraine win and push the Russians back to their 2014 borders. Thanks.
And thank you, Tam.
Yes. The obvious answer is yes. And I'm gonna begin with a quote. It says, "When will the Americans understand that their constant fear of escalation, their addiction to the status quo, no matter how bad it is, have become the foundation of our enemy's strategy?" I really think that sums up what has been going on lately. I think that the entire war in Ukraine was due to Western weakness. Putin, he made a calculation based on previous incidents, Alexander Litvinenko died in due to polonium in London, or it's Skripal in the UK, several others who have died in Europe on the hands of the Americans. I mean, the Russians under Putin. And this is a real thing. This is part of, and also the red line in Syria, which Obama never responded to the way he should have. So he saw weakness in the West. He thought that the response would not be stronger than what was seen in 2014, when there was a bunch of strong words and fear of sanctions, weak sanctions and everything. So he made a calculation. And he thought that he was going to get away with it, that he was going to be able to just run over Ukraine, turn it into either Belarus or take over it basically, and put his own puppet. I don't remember his name, but he used to be the president up until 2014, I think it was. So I think that one thing that I'm a little bit surprised I haven't heard about is the fear of nuclear escalation, because since 2022, 24th of February 2022, there have been 92 nuclear threats on behalf of the Russian government since. So just if anyone thinks that the fear of nuclear escalation is real, they need to explain why the latest threat is more credible than the previous 91, because they are throwing this out there, and they use sort of the throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks kind of tactic in the Russian media and the people they pay. They
just telling you, I appreciate that.
look for
But
what
what
works in
authority
the
do you
West.
have over it?
Everything is to scare everyone from taking action against Russian aggression. And one of the most successful ones seems to be nuclear threats, based on the number of nuclear threats that have been expressed since 25th of February 2022. So, and I just think that the first one started basically when there was tanks. Or if you send the Abrams tanks to Russia, Ukraine, there will be nuclear war, and etc. For everything, there's always a nuclear threat for every single thing that the West will send. And so I don't take this very seriously. And if it would be serious, then they need to express why we would take this threat more seriously than previously. Anyways, I'm really interested in what Anson would say about this, but I think that what the Tomahawk can do is they can attack Russian pilots. It takes many years to get their pilots to train their pilots. So killing their pilots is a good idea. Going after ammunition depots is a good idea. And destroying the planes, because Tomahawks can also come with cluster ammunition. So you could destroy several of their planes that they use to bomb Ukraine. At the very least, they could force the Russians to put their planes that they use to bomb Ukraine outside of Tomahawk range, which makes it even more difficult for them to continue this war. And it would also make it easier for the drones that Ukraine already use to destroy their oil and gas infrastructure that they use to, it's good for the Russian economy, basically. So, I think that it's a very good idea, and I'm very happy, very surprised that Trump would do this. I think the reason why is basically because it feeds into his narcissism. He wants to go down as another president that have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's through his narcissism that makes
have a doctorate in that. And so, like, with that being said, like, a person can, like, have a doctorate in something, but can be the expertise at everything, right? Like, for example, when I was getting my undergrad, my choral director, Dr. Fuller, he's very, very, very well knowledgeable when it comes to choral directing and music history, choral performance, and all of these things. But like when it comes to like other things that's kind of outside of that scope, I wouldn't take his knowledge as being a doctor in music, and kind of like say that he can have the same knowledge to something that's out of that scope. So when it comes to Dr. Umar, like, I love his, activism that he's done in regards of like, Black awakening and just the Black experience. He is, a pan Africanist. So with that being said, I do believe in strengthening the Black diaspora. But when it comes to other things that he talks about, some things I just wouldn't say he's an expert in. And so just with that being said, there's that. And just I land there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Google. Oh my
I just want to start off by saying I didn't know who this nigga D'Angelo was until today. I didn't know who his wife was.
Okay.
Good luck anyways.
See, that goes on in our nation is not organic in nature. There are studies, multiple studies, that shows that foreign actors and their proxies are causing this kind of dissent to the advantage of those foreign actors. Iran being one of them, North Korea being one of them, and of course, public enemy number one when it comes to messing with the psyche of America is Russia. So a lot of the calculation to which you referred and to which Dominic referred about the inability of our nation to cohesively stand up to evil in the world, is how I'm going to put it. Evil in the world has to do with the manipulation of the public articulation of the issues by primarily the Kremlin. And it's not just with regard to Ukraine. If you go to the chat, and this is very fresh in my mind because I responded to somebody with regard to Israel because I posted, and I recommend, by the way, not that that's our topic, you scroll back and see this woman in London who gave this dissertation about all of these humanitarian crises around the world that are far worse than Gaza, not to minimize what's going on in Gaza, but far worse than Gaza, but nobody knows anything about it. Because there are no news articles about it, very few. One of the studies showed that in a certain period of time, there were 30, I got the figures right here actually, from October 7th, 2023 to April 8th, 2024, there were 32,000 articles about Gaza, 3,400 about Sudan. And if you think the people of Gaza are suffering a humanitarian crisis, it pales in comparison to what's been going on in Sudan.
Why? Well, then you take a look at what's going on social media, and you see that on TikTok alone, the start of the war in Gaza, there have been literally billions of postings.
Trump is accomplishing.
Billions. Not 1 billion. Billions. So many that it's not even statistically wild to even mention how many postings there are about Sudan, because they're virtually non-existent as compared to the postings about Gaza, and that's just TikTok. That's not all of social media, according to this study. So, who's the perpetrator of all of these postings that have caused people to shut down school campuses and attack people and march in the streets, not just in the United States, but around the world? Russia. And all of that is documented, and I refer to that as well. Now, I wasn't talking about Ukraine, but it applies to Ukraine as well. So the reason we view the body politic as being pussified, to use a term that Dominic didn't use, but he might have, is because we are being manipulated by Russia and other foreign actors and their proxies. These are paid individuals. You could draw a line between the people who are out on the street, and you're going to find it in other issues as well, to Marxist organizations that are funded from China and Russia. All of this is documented. This is not Gary's opinion. There's documentation for all of this, and yet we get repeatedly fooled by all of this. And when I say we, I look in the mirror and I talk about, I could say, the news media. We give way too much credit to these noisy demonstrations thinking that they mean anything. They mean nothing. They really mean nothing. When you've got, I don't know, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think there were that many, but I videotaped them. 300 people. I don't think there were 300, but I'll give them I'll be generous. Marching through Times Square, waving Palestinian flags, and talking about genocide of Jewish people. And there are people there to enjoy Times Square, overwhelmingly more individuals, and they're not even paying attention to them. Except the tourists get all excited. Oh, here's a demonstration in the middle of 7th Avenue and on Broadway. So, for them it was like, oh yeah, this is cool. Let's send some video back to Aunt Martha in Tulsa. But the reality is, nobody gives a damn about their cause, whatever their cause may be. Really, I mean, not nobody, but in the aggregate, nobody. And so we give a lot of attention to a lot of concern about, oh my God, we can't get involved in another war, when nobody's talking about getting involved in another war. Why is that even part of the discourse? Nobody is talking about, if you're going to send Tomahawk weapons or any other kind of weapon to Ukraine or to Europe to help them defend themselves, we're not talking, at least not at this point, about getting involved in a war. And yet that's part of the equation when people are discussing all this stuff. Oh my God, he's going to get us into another war. Oh my God, oh my God. Nobody's talking about that. I mean, they're talking about it, but it's not a fair assessment. They're talking about it because it's implanted in their brains by people who are controlling us, by people who are affecting the outcome of elections. And by the way, all this nonsense about the Russians wanting to manipulate our electoral process so that Trump would become president so they could control him, and then that backfired on those Democrats who allege that, the studies show, the investigations show, they were doing exactly that, but not to support one candidate over the other, to get us to fight one another. This is something the Russians have over long periods of time perfected, long before the internet. And the internet just gave them an opportunity to amplify it. So when you talked, Tam, about the concerns that we have, and when Dominic
Canada,
talks
John,
about
we're doing
it,
it. Listening to Gary Baumgarten's
in large measure
critical thinking forum. They're talking about Russia,
seeds
Ukraine.
that have been planted into our collective brains by our very enemy in this conflict. So that's a long response to what you had to say, or expansion of what you had to say, but what are your thoughts about it?
No, I agree, but it's also part of the Russian military doctrine. It says that it's trying to use the protest potential of a population because they know that democracies are open, you have freedom of expression, freedom of speech. So if you get their own population to protest against the government, then you can persuade them, you can force them to change course. And this is very much part of the weakening the West. This is part of the strategy to get people to either give up on the process of democracy so that they don't vote anymore and everything, because, and like you said, they will have people in Sweden where I live. A couple of years ago, you had this person who's working here on behalf of the Russian government. He's a spy, basically. They found out about him. So he was writing articles about immigration with fake names, one pro-immigration, one anti-immigration, and then he was arguing with himself to make it more inflammatory. And this is part of this is what they do, and it's very bad. But what I think lacks is a kind of response. You have to treat where it comes from with different, like, you have to change your rhetoric, obviously, but I think that when it comes from the right, the isolationists, right, I think that they seem to think that it's some kind of America can just isolate itself and maintain its economy and everything. It seems to not understand that it relies on its allies. That what has made America great isn't just America in itself, it's also the allies it has, because the reason why people want to move to Western countries is precisely because they are very good, but it's safety, the economy, all of this, and this is something that other Western countries also contribute with, and I think that this is something that isn't really articulated, and I think that's really bad. When it comes to the other side, it's a little bit more tricky but yeah, I think that there needs to be a much better response, and isolationists actually do occur on both sides of the political spectrum. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things that can be done when it comes to responding to these things, and I don't really see it. It's rare for me to see someone actually address these points in a way that, because you don't have, you can point to facts here. It's a fact that America wouldn't be the same country without its allies. So anyone who thinks that you can just isolate yourself from the rest of the world, you're completely wrong. And that these are the kinds of things that I think should be articulated. But anyways.
Tam, I saw it up close and personal in the 1960s, covering the Vietnam War protests. And I will tell you, I was not a supporter of the war in Vietnam. That being said, we were in a war in Vietnam, and one of the reasons we lost that war was because they lost the support of the public, and a good portion of the reason that they lost the support of the public is because Russia and China, and I'm sure others, were infiltrating the anti-war movement and causing all kinds of havoc and getting people out on the street. I know the people who were involved in organizing, some of the people involved in organizing, in that movement. So I know who they are, and some of them I see today out there on the Free Palestine movement and other issues that are legitimate issues. People have the right to go out and protest, etc., etc. But where are they getting funded? You know, the first protests after the attack on Israel, before Israel fired one round in response, was in Times Square on October the 8th, protesting Israel with signs that had been printed long before the October 7th invasion. Well, how did they know about the October 7th invasion? It's insidious, and for some reason, even when the facts are before us, we have a difficult time wrapping our mind around it. There's such a thing as doing the right thing no matter what. I think that was Dominic's point. He was a little more emotive about it, saying some things are worth dying for. But it's down to what is the right thing to do, and then determining how best to do it, and trusting that our people who are paid to make those decisions make the right decisions on how to do it. And I'm not saying that they all make the right decisions, and I'm not saying that that didn't contribute to our very sad withdrawal from Vietnam in the manner in which we left Vietnam.
Okay, this is politics, Russia, Ukraine, and yoga with candidate John. Go to John for Congress.
They were aided and abetted in that demise by people who were not American citizens. There were a lot of American citizens involved, but they were being controlled by outside influencers. And that was long before the internet. So it's magnified now. And some of that is going on right now with regard to Ukraine. So you have to take some of what you read on the internet, much of what you read on the internet, in social media, with a grain of salt. Thank you, Tam. Brent, Anson, and Steve. Brent.
So just a few comments. First, kind of on Tiger's comments about kind of the building Russian momentum and continued Russian momentum. I mean, the battlefield doesn't portray that. If you look at patrols, for example, you have several axes of advance by Russia that have been cut off, and Russians are essentially surrounded and surrendering. Ukraine's either making some progress in counterattacks now, or Russia's making very, very minimum advances. So I like Cross is not going to fall anytime soon. I don't think any observer of the conflict thinks that.
Go to johnforcongress.com. This is politics, yoga, Russia, Ukraine.
It's good to stay up current because this summer is not right now, and right now the Russian offensive looks a lot different than earlier. I just got to note that. The discussion on escalation, Russia has constantly said it's going to escalate. Attack on Turkey, we're going to be an escalation. Tanks, as previous mission, we're going to be an escalation. It's always proved hollow, and for good reason. I mean, a nuclear exchange is just as much risk for Russia as it is for us. That is a difficult place to go for a conventional war outside your borders. So I think we have to handle that with reason and also understand that waving that escalation flag doesn't mean you get a veto over any action you do. Because where does that end? Russia's been a bad actor for a long time. You can't just allow them to continue to be a bad actor because they have a nuclear weapon. Which brings me to my third point on, this whole thing, and Steve, you listen to the Tucker interview, and Tucker's a good Russian stooge that likes to prop their messaging. But, at the end of the day, one has to ask, why did all these countries that surround Russia, Poland, the Balts, Finland, want to join NATO? is because Russia is a really shitty neighbor, and it's been a really shitty neighbor for a long time, and providing collective security against that type of neighbor is a good thing, and providing that type of collective security against a bad actor in the world is also a good thing. You know, Russia, you know, I don't know what's going on in Vladimir Putin's design, but, you know, I've heard these ramblings about the 1100s, and I think you can only take self-aggrandizement and kind of, you know, narratives of history that support your views, but so far. I mean, at some points, Russia had designs into Germany. Does that mean we should be scared if they threaten Germany? I don't think so. I think we have to stand with the people of the world that want to be free and that want to kind of resist it. Which kind of finally brings me to the tomahawk discussion. You know, I think you're missing, or I think the room's kind of missing the bigger picture. You know, tomahawks are a means for long-range fires into Russia, or possibly into Russia. They're not the only means. You know, Ukraine has shown great effect with drones. We are giving them extended range attack munitions. Please Google that. It's a 500 nautical mile missile that can fire that can, you know, range Russia. We're giving that to them in the coming months. You know, if we do give tomahawks, that's great. But what really makes a difference isn't giving them the weapon systems, it's enabling the weapon systems with intel and the sort of targeting packages that are needed. And at least recent reports suggest that we are doing that. There's an RT article that suggested that we had the first strike on a petroleum refinery and aided by U.S. intelligence, which, you know, if true, that in my opinion, that would be great. But, you know, I think we're a little bit losing the forest for the trees. There might be reasons we want to not transfer tomahawks to Russia. Those reasons probably involve like tech transfer reasons, nothing to do with escalation or really nothing to do with Russia. We just want to protect our technology. But the real question is, will this administration, unlike previous administration, which didn't up until the very end, you know, enable strikes into Russia? And I'm hopeful that they will. And I think doing that will be a significant game changer.
So you're absolutely right that Tucker Carlson is a shill for Russia, but I don't think you are suggesting that Steve misquoted what Mr. Putin said using the Tucker Carlson platform to give his as a bully pulpit, right?
No,
so,
I'm not.
So I don't think it really matters whether Tucker Carlson, in the context of what Steve said, is kissing the butt of Putin. Of course he is. He's such a shill for Russia. He's an embarrassment. He embarrasses himself. But as a result of that, Putin felt comfortable going on his show and saying what he said. And so I don't think it negates what Steve said by suggesting that who Tucker Carlson is.
So my point is he was allowed to give an uncritical view, or he was allowed to give his view.
Right, it wasn't critically challenged, of course not.
Without any sort of challenging. And when that occurs, it's difficult to know if the speaker is just simply giving propaganda to a certain purpose, or is he a true believer like Steve suggested and believes all this kind of nationalist stuff. I'm more into camp that Putin is a smart guy and he's giving propaganda to a useful stooge.
Well, arguably, he took a reduction in position when he left the KGB to become president of Russia. To your point about challenging what Tiger suggested about Russia is winning the war, I think you're absolutely right. I think that if by any objective view, it's pretty much a stalemate. Russia does control more land overall, but Ukraine has repeatedly blunted some of the Russian offenses and has achieved gains, pushed the Russians back, and obtained territory back. Russia has suffered extremely heavy losses in manpower and equipment. Now, so has Ukraine. But the point is that if, we're going to do a running tally of who in the aggregate is winning this war, I think that it's sort of like a boxing match. You've got 3 judges, and they determine who won the round, and sometimes all 3 agree who won the round, but sometimes it's a 2-1 split decision, and there may be a split decision at the end.
I agree with that. My point is you have to also look for momentum changes in a boxing match. I would argue that there's been a momentum change in this boxing match since the summer, where, if you rewind the tape, Russia was making slow, very incremental changes. To a large degree, that has stopped, and Ukraine has been making successful counterattacks, and in a lot of cases, trapping pockets of Russian soldiers and forcing surrenders are pretty reasonable numbers of Russians who surrender. On the point, does Russia hold more ground? It also depends where you start the march, the clock. If you go back to the beginning, go back to 2020 when this war, one of the new phases of this war started. I mean, they were almost to Kyiv. Russia's been pushed back well far since then. I think they control. You have to Google me to make sure I'm right, but I think the number is around 18 or 17% of Ukrainian land right now, which isn't the majority of Ukrainian.
Yeah, I still suggest that it's a stalemate. I don't think either side can claim victory right now. Thank you, Brent. Anson and then Steve. Anson.
I'll try to be real quick. I posted, I was asked about bombing cities, bombing civilians, and I gave an answer, but I went a little more in depth in the chat. Never ignore the Russian people's capacity to endure suffering. Hitler and Napoleon forgot about that, or ignored it, or weren't aware of it, and look at the lessons that they learned. So if we decide to bomb, quote, Moscow, i.e. Civilian populations, I am pretty certain that the end result will be a dramatic escalation in national aggression. The people will demand national aggression and will not demand peace because a couple of apartment buildings got blown up. In other words, if you try to piss off the Russians, be very careful. The Russian people, be very careful, because look at the historical and I believe still current capacity for them to endure suffering, far more than what this nation is capable of doing. The second point that I want to make is, first of all, Tam, Dominic, Steve, even David made, David usually, well, David and I don't always agree geopolitically, but, basically they're saying, it's time to stand up. And you used a word, and I was flashing thumbs ups to Dominic when he was starting to talk about America as a chicken. And I thought, oh, cow, that's good. But you used the word pussified, Gary. That Dominic.
No, he didn't use it. That was my word. You're exactly right.
Yeah, but in your pretty long discussion with Tam about the influence of foreign actors is the thing that's dominating, is causing people to think that America is weaker, etc. I don't agree with that. I believe that America today is an overfed, oversexed, indulgent, pussified society because of the nature of our desire to have all the things that we have, and we're not willing to fight in order to preserve that which we have as a national society, as opposed to look at what America did to unite and endure during World War II. And even the way when we do fight now is reflected in that in our military doctrine. You talked about the 1960s. Obviously, you and I were alive and well and enduring all that. And I'm not trying to refight the Vietnam War or anything like that. But in the Vietnam War, we lost 58,000 killed, men mostly killed on the battlefield in Vietnam. In a 20-year war in Iraq and Afghanistan, how many American men and, women were killed on the battlefield during combat? Not 58,000 over 20 years. It was about 5,000 to 6,000 in both wars, combat deaths to American military personnel. Now, you can credit some of that to advanced medicine and all that kind of stuff. But that reflects the way we tried to win a war without the courage to storm the bastions of the enemy. It affects our rules of engagement in the way we have tried to fight wars since World War II. The rules of engagement that have become so stultifying for the ability of the American military to do its job to win a war. I think that, and I believe the inflection point for that happening was probably very close to the time that the Soviet Union collapsed. And very specifically, I would point out that one of the greatest detriments to the American Navy's ability to fight and train, fight, and win, the process began, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this one. The process began in 1992. You know what happened in 1992? Tailhook. Now, I am not going to forgive, I'm not going to make excuses for the sexual behavior of the American military. But the influences of tailhook have become pervasive across the United States Navy. And I'm going to a reunion in 2 weeks with a classmate of mine, a retired four-star, that led the tailhook investigation. And everything that resulted from that investigation, the sum total was to weaken the American Navy's ability to fight and win, train, fight, and win a war. And I believe that that downward trend in America is internal and caused by the nature of our society today far more than any influence that Russia, China, etc. can influence us on the internet or however. We're doing it to ourselves. We have a chance to follow the lead of Israel, and Ukraine should be the battlefield in which we reverse that trend. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to get into a long dissertation from either of us about this, but I would really like to understand better how the tail hook changed the Navy to such a point that it's ineffective. I would have hoped that it would have changed the culture.
Significantly degraded the effectiveness of the Navy. It began with tail. Tail hook alone didn't cause it. It began. That was the inflection point. If you look at how the Navy trained and operated prior to tail hook, and you look at how the Navy trained, operated today, that was the inflection point, that we started on a downhill path for social reasons. But that's a long discussion, but I'm not saying that tail hook alone caused it. I'm saying that was the inflection point that began the downhill trend in naval readiness and ability to train, fight, and win a war.
Look, you got the first-hand knowledge of this. I don't, but I can't comprehend how that might be. We don't have time to talk about it, but I'd love for you to explain to you. Send me emails before. When you get a chance, send me an email and explain it to me, because I don't understand how fighting sexual impropriety within the ranks results in the ultimate degrading of the training of the troops. I don't get that, but you will be able to explain that to me better. By the way, to your point, Anson, about this being an over-sexualized society, I guess I've been missing out. I must not be in the crowd of society.
I forgot all that shit about 20 years ago, Gary.
Jeez, I wanna see what I'm missing. I want to be with the in crowd, baby.
Well,
Steve,
I know what I was like back in the 60s and 70s too, and you do too for yourself, probably.
I might. Steve, you get the last word.
Yeah, Gary. The oldest military installation in the state I live in, my great-grandfather, 6 generations removed, was the first commander. He fought in the Revolutionary War. He knew what he was fighting for. I had a great-uncle that fought till he was so tired he couldn't even pull his rifle up and was shot and took, I don't know how long to recover from it. He knew what he was fighting for. I had a son that went to Iraq that is no longer with me. I don't know what he was fighting for. I don't know if he fought for it there. Someone please tell me. And now we're talking about this. We're talking about this kind of stuff here. And someone mentioned national security of the United States. You tell me what the national security of the United States is.
National interest. Maybe it's
national interest. Tell me the national interest. Tell me what it is. Tell me the national interest in Ukraine. Taiwan, they make their chips. That goes in everything. There's a national interest there. But the idea that somehow we've lost our bravery because we're not willing to spend blood on a battlefield where the United States national security interest is not at stake. Like I say, my great-grandfather, he knew what the interest was. He's in the Revolutionary War. He fought under George Washington. My great-uncle, when he laid in that mud after being shot by a German soldier, he knew what his national interest was. My son didn't know what his national interest was. He told me the contractors was over there making a ton of money and he was getting bullets shot at him. So before someone starts saying we've lost our will, maybe we haven't lost our will, maybe we haven't lost our bravery, maybe we just don't want to spill blood for some political purpose. And I'll leave it there.
So Steve, I hear what you're saying, and I empathize, as you well know, with your situation and the sacrifice your family has given as a result of all this. I get all that. But I don't know what the argument has to do with the discussion of Tomahawk weapons. I have not yet heard anybody suggest that we put boots on the ground anywhere unless
You are suggesting that this is a slippery slope and this is the beginning of that slope.
Well, it possibly could be. When I hear these words like national interest, we've lost our will to fight. We've lost our courage to fight. My great grandfather didn't lose any courage. He knew why he's fighting. My great uncle knew why he's fighting. My son seen a bunch of contractors running around Iraq making all kind of money for Halliburton and Dick Cheney. He didn't know why he's fighting. And the idea that we're getting pulled into something. This is a European matter. And we're getting pulled into something and being told, well, you don't have the courage. Well, my son had courage. My great-grandfather had courage. But my great-grandfather had righteous courage. He didn't have misplaced courage. And people need to think about this.
I don't know whether Anson, there you are, Anson. Could you clarify your position and see whether it's in alignment with what Steve is saying or whether it's being misunderstood?
There are countless Americans that have the bravery to do the next right thing. There are countless Americans that are willing to spill their own blood to protect and defend this nation. What I'm trying to address, Steve, is what my perception of the national psychic is. And I'm going to use a word that Gary hates and will claim he doesn't understand. America has become far too woke. And to be able to explain that, I couldn't get it into an email, that's for sure. But this whole malaise of we are not, can you imagine, Steve, if Biden had implemented, and I've read a book where they considered implementing sanctions against Russian oil, the consequence of which would have been $6 or $7 a gallon gas in the U.S.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
And for that reason alone, they withheld that level of sanctions. And in fact, they even drew down on the strategic reserve so that Americans, the pussified American psychic, didn't have to see gas gallons going up 50 cents a gallon. And that's chicken shit politics, and that's the thing that just really boils my guts. It's time for us, you and I can put our rifles on our shoulders and we would march off and protect and defend. And I don't denigrate that attitude, and there is a substantial amount of that. But the national psychic, Dominic called it, I loved it when he said, yeah, she was a hawk, she was a chicken hawk. Even our hawks are chicken hawks. And we've been pussified as a nation through our own indulgence. And until we figure out a way to be able to endure some suffering as a nation in order to fight and win the wars that deserve to be fought and won, then we're going to continue down on the downhill path. Thanks,
I can agree with that.
Thanks, Gary, for giving me the opportunity to try to have that brief discussion with my very, very good friend and man that I deeply respect, Steve. Steve and I are on the same boat, and neither one of us likes pussies.
Yeah, I'm with you, Anson. Yeah.
And that comment alone will get me in all kinds of trouble, I'm sure.
Well, thanks, Gary, for indulging us, and thank you, Anson.
Well, I wanted to clear it up because I wasn't certain that you guys were on the same wavelength on that issue, and I didn't want us to close without that being resolved. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time, so until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow. For the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
Republicans are going to lose this narrative so hard. It's great. I doubt it.
Agree. So Omari, you guys are
ML.
a new talking point that you guys are saying that the extension was only because of COVID. It's a COVID extension and COVID is over, so they shouldn't extend it anymore. And that's a lie. Why do you think they're saying that now?
Are you talking about how they're saying the government's too bloated post-COVID?
No, that's not what they're saying. They're saying that they don't know why the Democrats are making such a big deal about this ACA extension, because this was only a COVID extension because we went through this moment in time where we had to have it. But now COVID is over, the extension should not be extended.
You know, I think I heard Mike Johnson that like a couple of times.
That is wild. Yes.
I don't understand what COVID got to do because the ACA's been out for a long time.
Exactly.
So
I'm
that doesn't
glad
make
that
sense.
you're catching on to how much.
It's like a catch on. It's just only you guys are the brain. Only the left side of your brain works. I actually have